When we look at Shem and the Melchizedek order and the ancient priesthood after the flood, when the earth was divided, when we look at Shem and how counterfeits, how many have formed themselves after the original order of the Shemitic bloodlines here of the lands of the Americas, we understand what took place with the removing of Aboriginals from the Americas and placing them in slave markets in Portugal and Brazil, in Newfoundland, in Terra Nova. We look at this time frame of coming into the time of the fall and the celebrations of the new year and the ending of the summer. When we look at fertility and the need of the floods and how beneficial the floods and the rains were for fatness in the land, for the land to grow fat, was dependent upon the rain. So you see seven Shaboli and the completion. When you look at the seven and the new year and the completion of time and the harvest and the fatness and how beneficial the floods were during these particular times, not to overflow lands, but just enough so that there would be fatness in the earth, because if there was no floods, right, there would be famine. So this annual procession of time 1492 was a pivotal year, for a triple history was made therein. All three events took place in Spain, a land geographically known as Iberia, a name for which explanation can be found in the term Ibri, Evre, Hebrew. By the earliest settlers might have been known. Having lost the greater part of Iberia to the Muslims, the warring splinter kingdoms in the peninsula saw their first major union when Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of the Castile married in 1469. Within 10 years of the union, they launched a military campaign to roll back the Moors and bring Spain under the banner of Catholicism in March the same year. So we understand Spain fall off of the Aztec king. So when we look at the dance and worship, culture, praise and worship and the dance and the Panthera, whether it's the Jaguar, Lord, or the praying for rain, or the control or mastering, shape-shifting into forming out of the unknown what is needed for the people based upon the number, the census of the populations of the people. These ancient Asiatics, Amun, known as the Amu, Shepherd Kings, Hyksos, many different titles, to reverence these individuals who travel following the procession of the solar in a funerary procession. When you understand the land of the dead, and this land region from 30 degrees west from the Tropic of Cancer. When we look at Leo, the layer, Atlantis, the Atlantic Ocean, and the crossing of the Atlantic to come into the land of Ariel. When you look at Ariel, Jerusalem, the ancient name, and Haru, and the connection with Amru and the serpent and the ancient Nagus, and how these things were taken and demonized and used by many different cultures. But we understand when we can go into the mountains here in Bananombak, and you can see the festivals and the celebrations of the ancient cultures. These Aboriginal people were taken from the Americas and brought into these overseas, into across the Atlantic, right, and enforced under the papacy. You know what I'm saying? When you look at today and how we just function under religion and identify under religion, you have people now who aren't Roman Catholic considering themselves Roman Catholic. So people's identities, you understand, religions have taken over nations and become a form of nations. And when we look at what Catholicism and Christianity has done to the Aboriginal culture and the priesthood, and the removing of the priesthood here in the Americas, and have made us attached to commerce, exchange of money. When you look at fertility in the earth and the connection with the earth, you have to understand why the demonization of the woman is necessary in order to perpetuate this need of commerce, exchange of goods that are not goods. When we look at land and the necessity of land and to use land to cultivate cultivation and culture and our civilizations, our civics based upon order, you know what I'm saying, Torah, civics, how to govern body politics. When we look at fertility and Amuru and the first rulers, priesthood, shamans that set order, everything was ordered even according to the language. You know what I'm saying? So when we look at the formation of the sounds of fertility of the corn and this grain and the Shabbat and the place of the dead and these coasts and this protection of this landmass of this land of the dead from its eastern, western coast, which is on the Tropic of Cancer off the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. This landmass, this segregated landmass that exists in the northern and southern hemisphere. We understand this and the Gulf and the effect of the storms and the winds of the sun's movement throughout the heavens, throughout the tropics, and how the Tropic of Cancer and the month of Tammuz and prayer and the connection and why solar deities and the worship of deities and the demonization and the need to cultivate, how all these things are connected in order to keep us dependent on commerce and exchange. We understand our dependency is on our power. So when we look at this time frame at 0 degrees from the time of the summer solstice to now the 30-degree mark, when we look at going into this time of Leo in August, and the layer, the location, and we see Ariel, the connections with this land, and Leo, ancient Jerusalem, and these ancient locations according to the heavens. When we look at the oracles, the orcas, the guardians, the Tanim, the killers, the judges, that would we look at all the way from the Arctic in this measure, we're talking about 60 to 90 degrees latitude amongst this 0 degrees to 30 degrees longitude. So when we look at these storms and these wind patterns and what takes place, it's been showing you about Shu, the holder of the sky, and how the ancients were able to observe and form these calendars and form these instructions through the rotation of rituals, of annual festivals, and the significance of these festivals and the